Welcome to Theater and Stream, a film podcast. I am Matt, and this is a Minisode. Chuck and I are still going to be on break for another week here before we return June 19th with our review of The Flash. But we didn't want to leave the channel completely hanging, so in the meantime, we're recording some bite-sized reviews of what we've been watching this week. First up, I went to Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse in theaters. I'll just come out and say it, this film is as good as everybody says. You should most definitely make the time to go see this in a theater on the biggest screen you can find, probably before The Flash and Elemental come out next week and take up all the premium theater real estate. I don't know if you've ever seen Mad Max Fury Road at home and then seen it in the movie theater, but it's still a good movie at home, but it's not that same experience of seeing it for the first time in theaters, or God forbid, watching it on your phone screen or something like that. But to speak a little bit about the film itself, this is a movie that completely envelops you. Starting from the beginning, there's that incredible intro sequence where Gwen Stacy is sort of recapping the events of the first movie. The score is increasing in volume, eventually devolving into a drum solo. And this is where Daniel Pemberton's score comes in. It's loud, it's manic, and if you look it up, he wrote almost 2 hours of music for this film. So between that and the soundtrack, the music of this movie just infects nearly every second of every frame of this movie. We're actually getting reports now that Sony is going to be sending out a new version of the film to movie theaters where the sound mixing has been mixed up a bit so you can hear the dialogue better in the movie, because people were complaining about that, but you can definitely see why they cranked the music track to the max setting, because it's really, really good. And the only thing striking or more striking about the score is the look of the film. The animators have utilized different styles of animations for different characters and universes that these characters are going into. And, while I'm on that subject, yes, this is another multiverse superhero film. And it kind of seems like we've been getting a lot of those recently. And we're only getting more starting next week with The Flash. But thus far, this is the movie that's made the best use of that concept, the multiverse. And they don't really use it as a cheap plot device, and it doesn't feel as squandered as it does in the MCU thus far. If nothing else, you can just kind of spend the entire movie trying to take stock of all the different animation styles being used. The Gwen Stacy universe has this watercolor look to it that reminded me of that first episode of the most recent Star Wars Visions season. And then you have these incredibly inventive one-off styles just for individual characters. Like the Vulture kind of looks like a Leonardo da Vinci drawing, like the Vitruvian Man or something like that. You could have 5 different characters in one scene, and each one of them is in a different animation style that's being rendered at a different speed or different frames per second. And this is in many ways sort of the perfect film for our 2023 ADHD-ridden, smartphone-addicted, constant feedback-craving minds. There's always something going on, slightly out of frame or up in the corner of the screen, whether it be Easter eggs or the comic book style onomatopoeia, or even comic book like editor notes that are just out of frame. or just, in the corner of the screen. And yeah, it's filled with stuff like that. And the only time the film really grinds to a screeching halt are these sort of numerous heartfelt scenes between parents and their children, whether that be Gwen Stacy and her dad or Miles and his parents. And I guess, to speak about that a bit, it's a good place to get my very small but very warranted gripes with this film out of the way. This is a film that is 2 hours and 20 minutes long, and especially for an animated film, that is much, much too long. Good luck with getting your kid to sit through that, I guess, but you can tell exactly what should have been cut out, or I can tell you exactly what should have been cut out. Those aforementioned heartfelt scenes between Miles and his parents, there's just too many of those in the movie. I mean, 1 or 2 is fine, but the movie just really grinds to a halt whenever any of those pop up. And then also maybe just like some of those action sequences could really be chopped up a bit. Like that one of Miles breaking out of the Spider-Man headquarters. That goes on for way too long. And, getting rid of those 2 things, that's probably 15 minutes of this movie gone, even though the movie would still be way too long at 2 hours, or around 2 hours even. But it really doesn't help that despite the massive running time, they don't even end the film. And if you've heard any complaints about this movie thus far out there in the world, you've probably heard this one. The film has what some people would call a cliffhanger ending, but I would sort of rebut that phrasing, because a cliffhanger ending implies that you have wrapped up most of the film's plot lines, but you've left a small opening or a morsel for a sequel. And this movie just straight up doesn't end in any way, shape, or form. Nothing is wrapped up, and every single thread is dangling. And I would sort of compare it to Matrix Reloaded or Matrix Revolutions, in being as open-ended as it is. In many ways, you can't even really judge this movie without seeing next year's Beyond the Spider-Verse, because once both have been released, you're going to have to watch them as one big 5-hour film. And there's something inherently gross about that, about ending a movie that way, especially one geared towards children. You can almost hear the studio execs saying, "Oh, thanks for coming to our movie, but we'll see you in a year. We'll see you end your $15 in another year." It's been reported that the movie used to be called Across the Spider-Verse Part 1. And you can definitely see why they dropped that Part 1 moniker, as if to fool people into thinking that they aren't getting just a half of a movie. So yeah, I guess that's sort of my complaints with the film, and my overall thoughts on Across the Spider-Verse. I kind of ended on a bit of a downer there, but I do want to reiterate that this film is definitely worth your time, especially in the theatrical setting. And probably even more so once the 3rd film is released next year and we have this full story. Now, to switch gears entirely, I want to talk a bit about a horror film that is available as a digital rental now. This is Malum, and this comes from director Anthony de Blasi, and it's actually a remake of his 2014 film Last Shift, which itself is a remake of his short film The Test. This is a film that has been remade twice now, and de Blasi has said himself that he wanted to remake the film 9 years later with a bigger budget, but it's also evident that as a filmmaker, he's really, really grown, and he has access to much better, higher caliber actors and creature effects. And if you go on the film's IMDb page or their Letterboxd page, you're going to find it full of keyboard warrior hipsters that have given the movie 1-star ratings, calling the film a pointless remake. And, maybe that is the case if you've seen Last Shift, but I think they're also a little mad at the popularity and all the coverage that this movie is getting, because people are getting into their little fandom club and it's been infiltrated by normies or something. Because this is objectively a better film than The Last Shift. Anthony de Blasi, he's kind of an interesting guy because he's a protege of Clive Barker, which you can see in all the creature designs for the film. And he also kind of seems like a director that has yet to catch his big break, despite having a lot of unique horror concepts a couple of years before other directors got popular based on those same concepts. De Blasi, he mentioned the King of Hell Paimon 4 years before Ari Aster made the movie Hereditary. And he also made a horror film about extreme haunted houses a year before Scott Beck and Brian Woods made the 2019 film Haunt. So I don't know if it's just a idea of being in the right place at the right time, but he's definitely had some of these concepts, way before some of these other big horror guys. But Malum itself is about a rookie police officer who's assigned the thankless role of guarding her small town's old, outdated police station, while everybody else on the force gets to go work at the nice new police station and get it up and running. And of course, the station she's at, it has a long, violent history that's full of bad juju, so strange, weird things start to happen. But Malum is made more unique by the fact that it's not just a ghost story. It's also a sort of kitchen sink of horror ideas and tropes, like cults and demons and serial killers. But it also starts off pretty restrained. It's sort of, they opt to amp up all the creepiness before getting to the jump scares and the gore. But once it does get to those things, it gets pretty bonkers. And I kind of have to admit, I was locked in for the thankfully brief, 93-minute runtime. Even when things do get a little nonsensical and the acting gets a little community theater-like, the scares and the stellar creature effects really were holding my attention. But because, this is mostly a one-location film, there is kind of a point where it gets a little funhousey, where it just seems like it's kind of the main character moving from room to room of the police station, taking in whatever fucked up vignette is waiting for her. But that's kind of a side effect of the limited space that the movie is set in, more than anything. But anyways, yeah, that's Malum. I just kind of wanted to shine a light on that a bit, because it's getting a little bit of press, but not a whole lot. And I do think it is most certainly worth your time. I don't know if I can entirely endorse it for the premium rental price that it's going for right now. I think it's $10. But maybe wait until it hits $3.99 or something. But that's going to be it for me today. I'm going to be seeing you in a week for the Flash review, but for right now, I'll turn things over to Chuck.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you to everybody who has been watching this little mini-sode that we've slapped together here. I appreciate you giving me some time off, to recuperate and try and write all my thank you cards. And first and foremost, I got to thank Matt for coming and standing by me for my wedding, and for giving Angie and I such wonderful gifts, including a copy of a movie that I've waited 10 years to actually I haven't added it to my collection despite it being my favorite film ever, and that is Shane Carruth's masterpiece Upstream Color, probably the last film the guy's ever going to make. And I'm very grateful that I got to see this on Blu-ray as opposed to whatever jank I first saw it on back in the day. Matt and I and a cohort of other guys in our friend group, like Eric Bracho and Zach Thorseth, back in Fargo, I rented this thing off of Apple so we could watch it just one time, and we got ungodly high, and we watched this, and it felt like an eternity had passed. I have to inform anybody who hasn't seen this movie that it is only 90 minutes long, or give or take. It is not that much of your life, but you'll feel like a whole lifetime has passed just because of the sheer barrage of sonic wizardry and editing that's on display, the variety of shots, the kinds of edits that happen in this. It's a stunning tour de force, and it's the ultimate example, for me personally, of what a single-minded individual can pull off in the realm of cinema, if the fates allow them to. And I guess without getting too lost in the weeds, I just simply want to say that we're getting to watch this movie again for the first time in a long time. Absolutely wondrous. The first frames, the way that Shane Carruth tells his story visually almost entirely throughout it. There is maybe 2 actual scenes of exposition between 2 characters. Otherwise, things just happen on screen, and it is entirely up to you as the viewer to be paying attention and to intuit, and you get something out of it. I know that's a tall order in this day and age, especially when everything is so distracting, but this movie is really special. I remember when I saw the first trailer for it, and you just see that ice swirling, you in the background, in like a picture of, and you have no clue what the context is, and you just hear this guy talking about why she can't see his face because it looks like the surface of the sun or something like that. It's just so bizarre. It's just so strange, on the outset. But if I'm going to elevator pitch this, it is the story of a parasite, its life cycle, as it travels from, the fetid primordial ooze of soil and earth and everything into plants, into humans. And then how does it get into the humans? And what does it do to people? And what happens when unscrupulous people get a hold of it? But really, it's just kind of exploring how all of these interdependent systems, in the lifespan of this plant and the parasite that feeds on it, is all dependent on people who don't even know that they are a part of its life cycle. And the 2 main characters of this are 2 people who have been dosed with this parasite and then been robbed blind and made to think that they just had like a psychic break and just blew up their whole life in one fell swoop with no explanation, no recourse. So I was just a drug addict. But the reality is something was done to them. And it's about 2 people who are inexplicably drawn together. Eventually, you'll realize that there is more to their trauma, that they share, and they aren't the only ones. And what do they do once they find that awareness? That almost fails to describe, exactly what's going on. But if you actually want to know before going in, I've done you a favor. But honestly, the best thing that you can do if you're a discerning viewer is just watch Upstream Color and just be ready for whatever the fuck it is, because we're never going to get another movie from this dude. A topiary is floating around in script form, as is the Modern Ocean, which had a whole cast lined up, and then it never got made. I'm pretty sure it never got made. It never will get made. The second gift we got, this movie, I have probably watched this more in the last week since we got this than in my entire life, and that is a beautiful steelbook edition of My Neighbor Totoro. And I have to confess, we haven't opened to this yet because we haven't needed to, because HBO has it on their, or I should say Max has it as a part of their library in English and Japanese. And it's amazing that you can have an animated movie, a kids movie, and have it just be like relaxing hangout time. This is basically the slow cinema of anime, and it's the most wholesome and simple, and it's just about 2 little girls getting to know a forest spirit, and and just how it helps them navigate a difficult time in their lives when their mother is in the hospital. It's all very sweet, and November loves it. My stepdaughter just loves Totoro. She has an umbrella that she whips out during the movie at the appropriate times. When they're standing in the rain, she has her umbrella out. When Totoro has it, and he's flying around, she has it out. When they're doing their little dance to make the trees grow, November's doing it right along with them. So I've absorbed this movie, to my core, at this point, just because it's just on so much in our household. I had to shake things up a little bit, but if you haven't seen Totoro, fucking do it. It doesn't ask much of you. That's what the beauty of it. That's what makes it work. Is that if you can't get on board with this, if you have difficulty grasping what's going on here, then maybe you should just watch Kung Fu Panda for the millionth time, because you can't appreciate something simple and and beautiful and wholesome in every way that isn't cloying and saccharine. Like, all of its emotions feel earned. Like, its drama is realistic. In that way. Like, all the fantastical shit you could almost just chalk up to active imaginations, except for the fact that so much evidence is left of the animism inherent to the philosophy behind it. I've thought a lot about it, and I'll probably be watching this for the rest of my life until she gets sick of it, because like there was a time where we only watched like Peppa Pig and Bluey. So I will accept this variety. I'll take what I can get, especially when it's culture. You don't expect culture to be appreciated by a toddler, but November gets it, so there's hope for us yet. The last thing that Matt you gave me that I am waiting to crack open, just because we have to do it at the allotted time, but I'll throw it up here now just as a tease. But he also got me Tarsum's The Fall. Extremely hard to find. We only could find it on DVD, because we have been talking about doing a Tarsum retrospective for some time now, and this was the big roadblock, was getting our hands on this movie. So look forward to watching that, reviewing that in the future. Thank you for watching this little minisode. We'll be back on Monday to talk about The Flash, and whether it's a train wreck or if it's the phoenix rise from the ashes that DC Comics so sorely needs. So have a good one, everyone, and take care.